Right now, longtime Trump confidant and former advisor Roger Stone is preparing for his arraignment tomorrow, now that he's been indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller.
And just this morning, while out on bond, surprise, surprise, he spoke to the media about the possibility of reaching a deal with Robert Mueller.
Are you willing to cut a deal with Mueller to avoid getting the case going to trial?
I don't answer hypothetical questions. I have no intention of doing so, however.
Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi joins us now live from Capitol Hill. Congressman Krishnamoorthi is also on the Intel Committee, so he will have some fun listening to all of these folks when they come before Congress. Congressman, good to see you. I want to get your reaction, which is different from Stephanie's reaction, which involves the horn. About Congressman,
I don't have a horn today.
Thank you. About Senators Grassley and Blumenthal just introducing legislation to require the special counsel to give Congress a report with all the underlying evidence. What's your thought on this?
I think that's absolutely essential. I think the other day we heard Mr. Barr testify before the Senate that he may not actually turn over the report that Mueller produces. So this would be absolutely unacceptable because we need full transparency on the report.
How confident are you that you're actually going to see this bill come to fruition? We know in the past we've seen bipartisan support to protect the special investigation, yet Mitch McConnell was never willing to bring it to the floor.
Yeah, I don't see it going too far with Mitch McConnell over there, and obviously a bill has to be signed into law by the president. So I don't see that actually happening, and that's why I think that the House Intel Committee has to continue with its investigation of the Russia probe and ultimately produce a report of its own.
Let's talk about the indictments. You were talking about the latest, obviously, being Roger Stone's. All signs pointing to Donald Trump. There's some people who are still unclear. They still try and say, look, these are, Sarah Huckabee Sanders would have you believe that all of these things are just individuals doing this on their own, with the wacky coincidence that they all happen to have been in the president's orbit and hanging around the campaign.
Yeah, that sounds a little far-fetched to me. I think that with the amount of lying that's going around here, I mean, it's obviously a full employment bill for criminal defense attorneys at this point. But beyond that, clearly there are a lot of people lying, and there's a reason why. I think Mr. Mueller is not going to leave any stone unturned at this point, as you can tell, so to speak. And he is going to proceed methodically up and down the food chain.
Okay, I want to get your reaction to President Trump lifting sanctions on Russian companies linked to Oleg Deripaska, longtime associate of Paul Manafort, a guy that Manafort was in debt to the tune of, I want to say, $19 million when Manafort joined the campaign.
This is totally unacceptable. And actually, this is an instance where a huge bipartisan majority of the House just recently voted to disapprove of the lifting of these sanctions. I find it really hard to believe that Mr. Deripaska has somehow turned over a new leaf. He's a bad guy, and we should not be lifting sanctions on any of his entities.
Talk to me about the GOP not naming members to the House Intel Committee. This seems to be a stalling tactic in some fashion. There's some work you can't do on that committee until all the names of the members of the committees have been established. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks now, and I think Chairman Schiff is going to have to take action with regard to this issue. I think that it's not a surprise that they don't want to continue with the Russia investigation. We saw what Mr. Nunes did in the last Congress, but now we don't have time to wait.
All right, let's talk about the shutdown.
Yeah.
We know that the partial government shutdown is temporarily over. There's less than 20 days to sort out some solution. Chris Coons was on TV earlier today saying we need more border security. We're prepared to allot more money to that. We heard the same thing from Hakeem Jeffries over the weekend. What we don't hear Democrats, I'm not even sure I've heard Republicans over the weekend saying they'll put any money towards President Trump's physical wall. Do you have confidence this committee can come to some sort of compromise or negotiation at the end of this period and bring it to the president?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we will compromise on what types of measures are necessary to tighten border control, but there's not going to be a wall that's a concrete wall, sea to shining sea, that's going to come out of this. If the president wants to call it a wall later on, even if there is not a wall, that's his prerogative, but I don't see a wall having votes in either the House or the Senate.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, good to talk to you as always. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I make a point to you? You were saying that Sarah Sanders continuously says, well, these people, there was one odd person there, one odd person here, but Paul Manafort was the campaign chair. While he was the campaign chair, that is what put the president over the top at the Republican National Convention to secure the nomination. And the president and Rudy Giuliani, while Paul Manafort sits in jail, have not turned on him.
Yep.
They have not said this guy was off on his own, he was rogue.
They turn on everybody all the time.
They haven't said word one turning on him. And we know he's a bad egg.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.